Hello and welcome to The Pitch, home of the greatest movie ideas on the internet.
Accept no substitutes.
Here we pitch our concepts for a new movie, whether it be a sequel or an adaptation, and today we are going to adapt the game The Last of Us 2. Spoiler warning, seriously, we're going to spoil the shit out of that game. The Last of Us 2 is the most recent game from developer Naughty Dog, and its reception has been mixed, to say the least. It's the latest media release where a very small group of ridiculous trolls have allowed a media company to use their misogynistic comments as a smokescreen to deflect from any genuine or real criticism of the game. Some of the comments directed to the creators of the game, whether they be the writers, directors or actors, have been truly vile and have made it so that once again a media company can legitimately shit on its fan base, even when there's a large group of fans who actually want to discuss it and talk about the flaws in a sensible and genuine manner. A lot of those people that have problems with the game are not degenerate assholes that just want to spew hate. I don't care about politics. I don't care about the political views of a game developer. All I want is a good game. But for me personally, I don't think The Last of Us 2 was a good game. Let me explain.
I don't know what happened. I was supposed to take her to the Fireflies and walk away. You go halfway across the country with someone. She needed her immunity to mean something.
The Last of Us is very much a narrative play game rather than a gameplay game. By that, I mean that it has a very strong narrative arc and many protracted cutscenes, and so the game lives or dies by the strength of its story. In this way, the first game succeeded by keeping the story relatively simple, relatively straightforward, but also our characters relatively relatable. I've said relatively too much now, haven't I? For me, the second game fails because the story becomes too complex for its own good. It asks us to accept a main character who we loved getting killed, and then it asks us to play as their killer. More than that, it asks us to understand her point of view without ever really giving us a reason to empathise with her. So, with recent news that the first game is going to be turned into a TV series, I thought I would pitch what I would do if I made a movie of the second game, to see if I can improve the narrative. We open on Joel explaining what he did at the hospital to Tommy. They return to the town and we have much the same scenes that we actually do have in the game. Although I would tone down how angry Ellie is at Joel. For me, it just doesn't quite ring true. Yes, I understand that she would find it challenging, that she was going to be this great thing. She was going to be the saviour of mankind, the answer to a great world problem. And that must have really driven her ego, and therefore fueled her disappointment that it didn't happen. But at the end of the day, Joel saved her life, and that also would mean something to her. The idea of giving up your life for a larger cause sounds great, but I don't think there are many people who would really lie down on a gurney to die. And in my playthrough of the first game, I don't remember Ellie being aware that the procedure was going to kill her. Anyway, I get that she would want it to be her decision, but I doubt after several years that she would still be as angry as she's portrayed in the game. Having touched base with Ellie and Joel, we're introduced to a new character, Abby. She is part of a paramilitary group known as the Washington Liberation Front, run by a man called Isaac. She is told that a terrorist that they have been looking for 5 years has finally been found. We are told through dialogue, but crucially not shown at the moment, that this terrorist killed Abby's father. And so Isaac is allowing Abby to lead the group who are going to kill him. So we have our story set. We have Joel and Ellie still, and we have Abby. A new character. People are wondering, who is she? What's this whole side story about? They very quickly will realise that both stories are going to progress along at the same time, and we're going to cut back and forth between the two groups. We return to Ellie and Dina, who are going out on patrol. We have some character and relationship development, and then a swarm of zombies attack. They escape to where they know Tommy and Joel are stationed, but when they get there, they find both of them beaten and bloodied. After fighting off the swarm of zombies, they try to get Joel and Tommy back to the town. Tommy recovers, but Joel's wounds are more serious and he dies from his wounds. Tommy explains to Ellie and Dina that they were ambushed and that he heard the group that ambushed them talking about the Fireflies and California. He tells them once he is healed, he will head out to get revenge. Ellie tells Tommy that she wants to go with him, but Tommy is cross with Ellie. He says to her, "You were mad at Joel. You didn't really care about him. Now he's dead. You want to be the one to go out and get revenge." And so he refuses to tell Ellie who the ambushers were or what they looked like. Not, of course, that he knows that much anyway. He criticizes Ellie for being mad at him and making Joel feel bad about what he did, and vows that he will go out and avenge his brother's death alone. Meanwhile, Abby and her crew head out to hunt the terrorist. During their journey, they are attacked by the Seraphim, and Abby's ex-boyfriend Owen goes missing. Thinking he has been captured by the Seraphim, Abby decides to take a detour to go and rescue him. Back to Ellie, and she decides that she is going to follow Tommy and help him whether he wants her to or not. Dina asks Ellie to stay with her, but Ellie feels that she needs to avenge Joel's death. And also, Tommy is not in the best shape, and so she feels like he will need her help. She tells Dina that she lost her dad, and that she doesn't want to lose her uncle as well. We can see that Ellie feels some guilt for the way she treated Joel. Ellie heads out alone on horseback tracking Tommy. She has to make her way across an infected part of town, and she saves Tommy from a Rat King monster. We swap back to Abby, who is leading her team in attacking the Seraphim's base. During their assault, they find a boy, Lev, and his sister, Yara, who appear to be being held captive. Abby frees them, but Yara's arm is severely damaged. Owen isn't in the camp. He's nowhere to be found, so Abby takes the two children back to her base with the Washington Liberation Front. The WLF operate on Yara's arm, but they aren't able to save it. And Isaac is mad that Abby is wasting time and resources on Seraphim kids. Abby explains that they could be useful. They could give intel about the Seraphim. They're also young enough that they could be trained up and become good members of the WLF, even though Yara now only has one arm. She promises that she will train Lev and Yara and then take them on her mission to hunt the terrorist. While Yara is healing up, Abby spends some time in the WLF compound. She goes about her normal jobs in the compound, and she's checking her supplies when she catches Owen sneaking back into the camp and stealing supplies. He confesses that he wants to leave and travel south because he's heard that an old group that they used to run with, some of his friends and some of Abby's friends, are forming back together and making a stand further to the south of the country. Abby thinks this is nonsense. She thinks their old group of friends had died. That's why she joined the WLF with him. But eventually, she lets him go. Abby is then alerted by one of the other soldiers that Isaac has decided to execute the Seraphim children to send a message to the rival Seraphim faction. They have a face-off, and some of Abby's crew side with her and some of them don't. Either way, they're hugely outnumbered by Isaac's group. Yara shoots Isaac and sacrifices herself so that Abby's group can escape. In fact, we can even have her calling out to Abby as she's dying to make sure her little brother is safe. Abby is still driven by the fact that she wants to get revenge on the terrorist who killed her father, and so her group, when they leave, that's immediately what they head out to do. Abby even mentions that perhaps once they've completed that mission, they can head down south and see if they can meet up with Owen. Meanwhile, Tommy, who is even more injured after the Rat King zombie monster encounter, has accepted Ellie as help. He really doesn't have a lot of choice at this point. He's thankful that she saved his life, and he even accepts that he reacted in the same way that Ellie did. So he was kind of being a hypocrite. They push on to California, where they encounter They are another faction in the world, and they capture people and use them as slaves, and they also weaponize the zombies by having them isolated in sections around their camp to act as guards. Tommy and Ellie battle with a group of them and also with some zombies, and then Tommy, because he's already quite injured, gets captured, but Ellie gets away so that she has the chance to regroup and then try to save Tommy. Back to Abby, and her group are closing in on the terrorist. They are in a familiar looking wood that is near a familiar looking town. They are making their plans when they get hit by a swarm of zombies, and whilst they are trying to fight their way free, they encounter two men called Joel and Tommy. You see, it's at this point in the story, the way I would tell it, that you realise that actually Abby's story was happening before Ellie's story. It throws you off a little bit, it makes you question everything you've seen, but in a good way. In a way that makes you stop and go, whoa, hang on, what's happening? Hopefully encouraging you to watch more. Also, you should have, if we've done everything correctly, you should have developed some sort of empathy with Abby. You should have seen how upset she was over the loss of her father. You should also have seen the way that she cares for the young children and that she wants to do what's right from her point of view. When she sees Joel and Tommy, that's when we get the flashback of her as a younger child with her father, and she sees Joel kill him because he was the surgeon who was going to kill Ellie to make the vaccine in the first game. We see Abby and her soldiers beat Joel and Tommy. We see Abby think that she has killed Joel. And then we see the soldiers discuss where they're going to go next. So once they think they are both dead, they talk about going to California, they talk about reforming the Fireflies, and now they mention that group by name, and also by meeting up with Owen. Whilst they're talking about that, our camera will pan down to Tommy's eyes, which are still open, he's still alive, but they slowly close. So we have seen Abby risk her life for innocent children. We know that she's capable of doing good things. We know that she's not inherently a bad person. And so when she arrives and she kills Joel, we are conflicted. The important change that I've made to the story is that we are asked to like Abby before we find out that she kills Joel. This is, in many ways, it's both similar and a complete opposite of the ending of the first story. In the first game, we endorsed Joel's actions because Ellie didn't actually knowingly choose to sacrifice herself. We know about Joel's biological child, and we can see that Ellie has helped heal those wounds. We want them both to survive and to continue to bond, and so we take some joy in playing as Joel and saving Ellie's life. Whereas here, if we've done our job properly, we want Abby to get revenge because we like her at this point. We can relate to her, and we hope that she achieves what she sets out to achieve. Indeed, there is somewhat of a nice comparison between our two main characters, that being Abby and Ellie. Until, of course, we find out who Abby is and who she wants to get revenge on. Now we get the conflict that I think Naughty Dog was going for in the first place, but we get there in a more organic manner. It doesn't feel like we're forced to like one character or another. It feels more natural. While we are questioning our allegiances and how we feel about the whole situation, we return to Ellie. Maybe you want her to get revenge for Joel now, even that you know it's Abby she's hunting. maybe you don't. But either way, Ellie needs to rescue Tommy and have a showdown with Abby. So, Ellie fights her way through the Rattlers' compound. She releases clickers and runners, causing chaos everywhere. She finds Tommy locked up. He's injured but still able to walk, and so she frees him. He points out to her that some of the people in the other cells are the ones who killed Joel. They have clearly been held by the Rattlers for some time and are in pretty bad state. You've got to think that Abby would have murdered Joel and then left straight to go to California and then got captured by the Rattlers while Tommy was healing up. So that's, what, a few weeks head start they would have had. If you then think about Ellie having to save Tommy from the weird zombie mutant monster things that they've come across as they've gone along, there's less of them, so they would have had to sneak around more. They'd have had to go further out of their way. You could say they'd probably been captured for at least a month before Ellie and Tommy show up. Ellie lets everybody out of the cells because she needs as much chaos as she can to cover her and Tommy's escape. But Abby is not in the cells. Tommy tells Ellie that the one who actually killed Joel is somewhere else. She has been punished for trying to escape, and they can find her down next to the beach. Ellie finds Abby tied to a pole. She cuts her down and gives her a few moments to gather herself before Ellie attacks Abby. They fight back and forth, but it's a pretty quick fight because Ellie is in a lot better condition than Abby is. Abby bites off 2 of Ellie's fingers, but Ellie stabs her through the throat. You see, Ellie feels guilty for treating Joel the way she did. Even though we've toned down how angry she would have been at Joel, still there is some guilt that she didn't take the opportunity to spend time with him when he was still alive. She feels angry at Abby because that time was taken away. Once Ellie kills Abby, she breaks down in tears. She takes her time, cleans herself off, helps Tommy onto a horse, and they ride back to Jackson. When there, Ellie finds that Dina has left their home and has started living with somebody else. Ellie feels hurt, but accepts it without too much drama and returns to Joel's house, where she finds his old guitar and picks it up. She starts to play, but realizing that the 2 fingers that she lost mean that she will never play the guitar properly again. That makes her think more of Joel and the futility of all the bloodshed that has gone on, and again she breaks down in tears. You'll notice that we've changed the story in quite a few different places. It's less crammed with awkward forced storytelling moments, and we keep our main 2 characters apart until the end. We've switched Abby's story around so that you bond with her before you find out that she kills a character that you love. That way your empathy and your conflict comes naturally rather than feeling forced upon you. Also, at the end, I think we're still rooting for Ellie, as opposed to how I felt when I played the game, where I didn't really like Ellie, I didn't really sympathise with her at all. All in all, I think this makes for a more satisfying story. It will still play with a lot of the themes and the ideas that the original story had. Not all, admittedly, but most. And when it comes to Lev being transgender or not, you can put that in. I don't think it really makes any difference to the story. If you're very concerned that there's not enough representation, then great, chuck that in. It still works. In fact, it maybe even works even more, because then you can see why Lev has been held captive by the Seraphim, because they're religious nutcases, and so then you have more sympathy for Abby. So that's great. However, overall, I think the story told this way makes it more palatable and more accessible for the viewer. Anyway, did I address the problems that you had with the game? Did you love the game and think that I've completely ruined the story? Maybe you like both ideas and you can see merit in doing it either way. Let me know in the comments, and let's try to keep it civil, shall we? And I'll see you next time on Popcorn Dreams.